My typical response is, of course you're not, because you're not standing out, right? It's easier for a supplier to simply hit delete. Hello and welcome to the Wholesale Made Easy podcast, where we believe selling on Amazon shouldn't be hard, and we're going to prove it. My name is Dillon Carter, and I'm one of the co-founders at Vendrive, a tool that helps Amazon wholesale sellers streamline their businesses, stay organized, and land more profitable accounts. I'm sitting down with other successful wholesale sellers, and together we're sharing lessons learned and what it really takes to succeed with wholesale. I asked a question in our private Facebook group asking what are some of the biggest challenges that some of our newer members were facing when it came to selling wholesale on Amazon. Nearly 90+% of them said it's really just getting the account. Everything else is pretty easy, but the hardest thing is simply getting a supplier to approve you and say, yeah, you can carry us. That's great. Here you go. Give us your money. For some reason, that's the hardest thing. And it makes sense because there's so much perceived competition when it comes to getting these accounts. So suppliers are often berated day after day with tens, hundreds even of emails just saying, please give me a wholesale account. You know, nobody's making phone calls. Nobody's doing the things that really open you up to getting those accounts. And so nobody's asked the question, what do suppliers actually want? What really matters to them? And so when I initially started selling wholesale and facing this problem myself, eventually I just got to the point where I just started asking questions. So after I would get denied for a wholesale account, I would just take 5, 10, 15 minutes and say, listen, I totally understand. That's great. Can I ask you a few questions so I can just be more knowledgeable myself and understand this relationship from like your perspective? I want to understand, why is this so painful for you as a supplier to deal with Amazon sellers? Like, what really is it? And it came down to 5 major things. And that's really what we're going to talk about today, is these 5 solutions to 5 big problems that suppliers have selling to Amazon sellers. So we're going to dive into these things, and what you're going to quickly understand and realize, they're very easy to overcome. So this whole hurdle of getting wholesale accounts can easily be overcome using these 5 solutions. The first technique is to really understand the concerns of these suppliers. After talking and asking these questions, supplier after supplier after supplier, I eventually found there's a few commonalities. The first thing is they hate the fact that we have terrible communication. You know, many Amazon sellers, especially newer sellers, want to hang out behind email. They never want to pick up the phone call, have a conversation with a real person, and show how serious they are. So we hear this all the time across the board. Is a new seller comes in, they want to sell wholesale. They're like, hey, Dillon, I'm sending 20 emails a week, but I'm not getting any responses. My typical response is, of course you're not, because you're not standing out, right? It's easier for a supplier to simply hit delete on an email versus hitting delete while you're on the phone with them. So terrible communication, that's number 1. Number 2 is Amazon sellers are placing super small orders. So you're what we consider a small fish. And this isn't a situation where if you don't have, let's say, $10,000 to start your wholesale business, that you're just too small, you can't pull this off. That's not the case at all. What it really boils down to is being perceived as a small fish. And so here's what happens. A new Amazon seller, maybe they'll have good communication, they'll get that account, and then they'll just start asking for discount after discount after discount, and then place a $200 order. Well, from a supplier's standpoint, that doesn't really equate. Like, the amount of effort that they had to put in to make this work for you is not equal to the amount of value you're putting back into them. And so we have terrible communication, small orders, and number 3, the seller didn't stick around. So they didn't actually build a real relationship together. Now, here's something to really think about. If you want these exclusive accounts, you first have to have a real business relationship with that supplier. You're not going to get that by hanging out behind email, having terrible communication, placing small orders. What you do is you build that over time by having amazing relationships together. So great communication, you're placing realistic orders. And listen, if you can only profitably spend $500 with a supplier, let them know that. Let them know, listen, if I can spend 3, 4, or 10 times that with you, I will, but I have to be able to do so profitably. Get them to understand why you're placing a small order. Don't just place it. We want them to understand why we're doing what we're doing, and we're explaining it from a logical standpoint. And so the last one here really, and this is a personal one to me, is they didn't follow MAP policies. So for those of you who don't know what MAP stands for, that's MAP, it's minimum advertised price. So basically, it's a minimum amount you can charge for a product. So if MAP is $24.99, the lowest it can be listed for is $24.99. You cannot sell below that. Now, we all have to deal with this, right? People jump on a listing, immediately go 3 cents below MAP. We follow MAP because we have an agreement. We can't go below that, and now we're out of the buy box. What do we do? This is where having a great relationship with your wholesale suppliers come into play. Now you can quickly get that new competition off the listing and continue moving on forward profitably with that wholesale supplier. So let's dive really into all of these individually. So the first one is not being perceived as a small fish. Now this is kind of like approaching somebody you're dating. You put in a ton of effort to try and date that person. And eventually you get to the point where you go to ask them out and they put you in the friend zone, right? So the amount of effort you put in versus the amount of value you got out was not worth it. And so what ends up happening is you, as a seller, approach a supplier asking for the world, asking for everything possible. And then when they finally say, yeah, we can do that for you, you put them in the friend zone by placing $200 orders and never returning. Not really a good business practice, in my opinion. So it's not that we can't be a small fish. We just don't want to be perceived as one. However much money or capital you have to start your wholesale business with is irrelevant to how a supplier perceives you. So if you're starting with, let's say, $2,000, maybe even $1,000, that's okay. But the way you interact with that supplier, the way you handle business, shows whether or not you are a big fish or a small fish. It has nothing to do with capital. So that first hurdle that a lot of people, a lot of new sellers think they have is, Dillon, I don't have enough capital. Yes, you do. You're just approaching the whole thing as a small fish. So let's go ahead and shift that mentality to being a big fish. Now listen, if you have, let's say, $1,000 and then you get approved for a wholesale account and you can profitably spend $3,000 a month with them, wouldn't you do whatever you can to go raise that extra $2,000? That's the difference between being a small fish versus a big fish. Next one is having internal processes. And what I really mean by this is you have buying criteria. So just because somebody didn't approve you for a wholesale account doesn't mean anything. And just because they approved you doesn't mean it's going to be profitable. So what I like to do is shift the power position back to my side. Now, the way I approach this is similar to buying a car. So if I approach a car, typically the salesman is in the power position. They're kind of taking the lead. Now, what you don't realize the entire time is you are actually in the lead, because at the end of the day, it is your decision to purchase or not. This also, of course, applies to wholesale inventory. So at any point, I want to shift the power back over to my side a bit more. The way I'm able to do this is by saying, listen, I would love to spend $10,000, $20,000 a month with you, but it's got to be profitable for me to do that. Now, my buying criteria is I have to be able to move 30 units per month minimally by myself with current competition, 30% ROI, $4 per unit in profit. Now, if we can do that together, that sounds great. Love to move forward. If we can't, I totally understand. I'll have to move on to the next supplier, but it's not a big deal. And so what I'm doing is I'm letting them know they're going to have to work a little bit with me. I'm not asking them to change everything for me and give me the world, but we're making a deal. So I'm not approaching this like you would purchasing something on Amazon. This is not an e-commerce transaction. What we're doing is a business-to-business deal. That means there's flexibility on both sides. And listen, at the end of the day, they need amazing third-party sellers. But instead of approaching with a pre-approval, being a quote-unquote big fish, and a willingness to walk away, they typically feel they're in the power position. It's your job to shift the conversation so you're calling the shots. You're saying, here's the kind of inventory I'm willing to buy. Now's your chance to say, listen, if you have SKUs that fit my buying criteria, I'd love to carry them. If not, that's okay, and we can move on to the next supplier we're talking with. The third technique is to come with amazing recommendations. This is kind of stolen from Ramit Sethi from I Will Teach You to Be Rich, where he uses the briefcase technique to apply for jobs. So we're taking the same approach, but with suppliers. And what we're doing is we're showing we've done homework. We're showing we're different than the rest, and we are top performers. And the way we're doing that is we're creating a one-page document. It's nothing too fancy, but it's showing opportunities that we can take advantage of, such as listing optimization, certain keywords we've already done research to run PPC advertising to on or off Amazon. And we're looking at all the ways we're going to make this listing better. Now, how this approach really works is as we're on the phone and maybe let's say they're on the fence, I have an email queued up. I'm going to go ahead and click send. I'm going to say, hey, listen, John, real quick, check your email. I just sent you just a one-page document, some research we've done of exactly what we're going to do once we start carrying this inventory. Now, there's a lot of opportunity here. We're looking at listing optimization, adding some better images, changing some of the title. We're going to be running some PPC advertising. We already have 10 to 20 keywords. We're immediately going to start testing. So have it, take a quick second, look that over, let me know what you think. And then we're going to pause. All we're doing is we're showing immediate value. Now, if we're willing to give this away for free, which is basically what we're doing, and we're saying, listen, we can do all of this for you and buy your inventory. How does that sound? It's a much easier conversation to have, and it, again, shifts power back to you. Not only are you having buying criteria that they need to meet, you're also showing how much work you're going to put in. So you're going to be adding value more so than simply buying the inventory. And this is where a lot of sellers get caught up. They say, well, Dillon, I'm buying inventory from them. That is adding value. I'm giving them my money. That's not enough. Anybody can do that. The difference between a top seller and an average seller who may or may not be here in 2 to 3 months is that willingness to do more and add even more value than what is expected. And our last one is always test PPC ads on new wholesale products, with the parentheses that there is enough margin. The reason we do this is the age-old question of, well, are you just going to create another slice of the pie, or are you going to increase the size of it? Listen, the immediate way we can increase the size of that pie is by running PPC ads to our new wholesale inventory. Luckily, PPC on Amazon is incredibly cheap, so we're talking testing $20 per new SKU to see if we can profitably run it or not. The good news is, if it's a great campaign, you can scale it out and sell even more inventory, which increases profit. If it's not, that's okay. We go ahead and cut ads. Maybe we test a few more keywords, then we just keep selling organically. But the point here is that we are trying, we are testing. Now, this is in addition to optimizing listings, all the long-term stuff. But what we want to do is approach this from a short-term perspective and a long-term perspective. We can immediately show a supplier that we can increase sales 25%, we're better able to position ourselves to get exclusive discounts, maybe even an exclusive agreement. So what does this all look like once we've actually found a supplier to reach out to? It goes just like this. Number one, have a one-page document queued up in a draft email with specific steps on how you can increase the sales volume or the value for that listing you're looking at. Number two, open the conversation as if you're speaking to a real person, not a business. Make them laugh, start by building rapport, and start by building a real relationship. You're talking to John, you're talking to Debbie, whatever. You're not just talking to the brand. So have a great conversation that is personal. Get them to elicit some emotion. That way they know you as Dillon, John, Jenna, whatever your name is. And then it's easier for them to want to approve you because now they already like you. Now, number three, shift to the power position by letting them know that you are a big fish and you're looking to get even bigger. Again, you have buying criteria that they also have to meet. Number four, answer their concerns before they even consider bringing them up. This really goes into the 5 techniques, right? Let them know you follow MAP. Let them know you run and test PPC ads to all of your new wholesale inventory. Let them know that you're already on the phone and you love talking with your suppliers week after week and adding more value. Number 5, remind them that you're willing to spend as much as you profitably can with them, assuming they meet their buying criteria. Be open about what the specifics are. Don't feel like you can't share what you need to make the deal work together. If you need $4 in profit per unit and it's at 3, ask them, what can I do to get to 4? Having a reason to actually get them to change their minds or shift the deal a bit is okay, but you have to have a real reason. You can't just say, well, I just need $2 off. It's like, no, here's my buying criteria. We're so close. What can I do? Maybe it's ordering another 30 units. We can make that happen for you. Perfect. I will absolutely order 30 more units to get my buying criteria set. Ultimately, this whole conversation shouldn't take more than 30 minutes, but if it's going longer, that's a really good sign. That means you're going more in depth, you're answering their questions, they're answering your questions. Just remember that 98% of the time, if not more, it's the same conversation with a different supplier. So the more you do this, the more you practice it, the more you understand when to say what and how to say it. It's the quickest way to take a supplier who is immediately going to deny you and get them to approve you where 98+% of the other sellers could not get that account. That's built-in competitive advantage. Now consider you're not just a quote-unquote Amazon seller, you're an e-commerce business owner. This goes back to being a big fish versus a small fish. The way you approach doing business in these conversations with these potential suppliers you're going to start carrying speaks volumes to the amount of value you are going to bring to them. That's how you get accounts. It's not just tactics and strategies and different sourcing techniques. It's really how you approach the conversation. It's how you approach building your business. If you build it the right way, it's much easier to grow and to sustain growth. If you approach it by saying, I'm just going to send emails and I'm not going to talk on the phone, I'm just going to do whatever I need to do, and I want a side hustle, it's not enough anymore to build a real business. So approach it being a big fish and you'll do perfectly fine. If you want to read more about these 5 techniques to get wholesale suppliers to approve you, you can do so by going to vendrive.com/5 techniques. That's vendrive.com/5 techniques. Before we leave, I have a huge ask. If you enjoyed this podcast and you got value from it, leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. The way we're able to have more impact on more sellers is by getting in front of them. We can do that by having more reviews and getting pushed to the top of iTunes podcasts. So leave us a review and let us know what you think of the podcast.